This is where our education is heading. A place where the air is unsettling and the ground is ice cold. A place where no one wants to be.
Now, you may think I'm exaggerating. Well, how about you go to your own school and ask yourself that question again? Am I exaggerating?
You say 1/3 of fourth graders and 1/4 of eighth graders are functionally illiterate. Nearly 1/3 of students don't earn a high school diploma. Last year, 1.3 million U.S. students failed to graduate from high school. An estimated $1 billion is spent each year on college remediation, knowledge students were supposed to obtain in high school. Among the top 30 industrialized countries, U.S. high school students rank 21st in science and 25th in math.
Now, I did some digging around, and experts say that at least 34 states are providing less funding per student for the 2013-2014 school year than they did before the recession hit. 13 of these states have cut per student funding by more than 10%.
I think education doesn't get a lot of funding because you as a kid cannot vote.
With the recession that hit, everyone suffered through that and are still feeling the effects of it. So I think that's huge, and a lot of funding was cut during that time. In order to get funding back, it's going to be much more difficult than it was in 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
A lot of the funding comes from taxpayers. And there are so many taxpayers nowadays that are sitting around, they forget that they went to school, they were educated, their children have gone to school and been educated, and a lot of them come to the opinion that why should I pay for these schools? My kids are done. So why should I pay for something that's going to be of no value to me? They do not look at it holistically. They don't look at the big picture that says we as a state, we as a nation need to educate our people.
They will do anything to get elected, and then they will, whatever their populace says they'll do, because they're there to represent the people. The problem is students don't get represented because they don't vote.
Seeing that funding is really coming from the government,
I went online to see how many bills for education were being passed, and most of them, besides holidays, were not even at a 50% chance of passing.
When I look at it from the way the country's structured and the way education is structured, it is one of the elements that has been passed over to the states. So the state is actually the one that is responsible for provision of education, and there are an awful lot of states that really do not want any interruption or intervention from the federal government. So if the federal government tries to do something, it is very difficult to get that implemented across or through all of the states.
The nation's saying third grade needs to know this, fourth grade needs to know this, and it's no longer up to the states. The federal government saying this is what needs to be taught in third grade, and you can add a little bit, but that's the basis.
We don't have the resources to support our students and our teachers the way that they need to be supported in order to be more successful. And in order to get funding, other programs have to be cut. So passing that through Congress is going to be difficult because people are going to have to make sacrifices, and they don't want to do that.
is this our fate? To abandon education and turn to a life of crime, destroying ourselves and each other? Any life as we know it?
Well, I certainly hope not. And I guess that leads to the real question. What will you do to help education?
First of all, I would.
What would I do?
One of the things that I would try and do would be to break down these larger schools into smaller schools.
Just funding, smaller class sizes.
I think that a lot of the funding should go to education.
You're gonna get better teachers if you pay them a little more, and then smaller class sizes. In a class of 40 kids, it's so hard to teach. You're just managing at that point.
I think you should start school when developmentally you're ready.
I would actually also tend to go to a year-round situation, because year-round is more realistic than having a schedule that's based on some ancient ritual, the ancient rituals of farming where you've got to take the summers off and you're going to take the winter, and it's basically that's the 180 days that we get.
The goal of education is not just to teach, it's to have children, have our students learn. Working together, the vast majority of states are creating better tests that measure essential skills, such as critical thinking.
And that's what makes our country great is, we provide education to everybody. We don't have the elite and then the slaves. The goal of education is to bring everybody on the same level playing field, and then they can make their choices. And that's what other countries are starting to notice now. You have your elite and you had your poor, and then education's coming in and bringing them together. It's bringing up the poor up to a national average, and then they can make a difference. Does that make sense?
Yes.